We are now going to move to our panel. So I would invite our facilitator, Sarah Bloom, to bring the panelists up. We're going to do a little real-time switch here. And while they're coming up, I'm going to introduce our panel. So I like to call this our boots on the ground segment, because as many of you hear me say, and I said it when I was in government and I say it where I am today, there's a difference between writing policy in Trenton, and then we need to understand how that policy plays out in the field. And I use the term boots on the ground because we need to hear from those who are living it in real time to share with us how things work or don't work and help to inform how we move forward with future policy. So today we're going to welcome perspective from a statewide water provider, a county sewer system, and insight from a user's perspective as well. I'd like to welcome our panelists. The complete bios are out at your table, so I'm just giving you a very truncated snapshot of these amazing people. William Varley, President, New Jersey American Water, and the New York American Water Senior Vice President for the Northeast Division. Mr. Varley is the principal external contact for American Water in New Jersey, serving approximately 2.5 million people. In this role, he reinforces and strengthens customer, regulatory, and local government relationships and drives operational and financial results. Bill, thank you for joining us. Michael Ruppel is the Executive Director, South Monmouth Regional Sewerage Authority, or for those of us, we used to love to call it SMRSA. Mike began his career in the water wastewater industry over 40 years ago and has held executive level positions in the U.S. Department of Defense and 3 other large-scale wastewater utilities right here in New Jersey. He's served in his current role for over 18 years, where he's championed the authority's leadership in asset management, reaction to climate change, cogeneration, disaster preparedness, and resiliency planning, just to name a few. Welcome, Michael. James Cosgrove is the Vice President and Principal with Kleinfelder East Incorporated, an architecture, engineering, and science consulting firm providing solutions to meet complex infrastructure and natural resource challenges. He's a registered professional engineer in New Jersey with over 28 years' experience in water resource management, with specific expertise in water and wastewater infrastructure, water quality modeling, watershed management, and environmental impact assessment. Thank you for joining us, Jim. And to facilitate our panel today, we have our own Sarah Bloom, who's our Vice President of Energy and the Environment, and I'd like to announce, and many of you have already read, that she has recently been named as one of New Jersey's 40 under 40 outstanding leaders. Take it away, Sarah. And I'm going to get out of your way.
Oh, you can start if you like. Thank you, Michelle. And one of the other things, too, that just happened this week is I got elected Vice Chair of the Clean Air Council. So we're continuing our presence at DEP. And NJBIA does serve on both the Clean Water Council and the Clean Air Council at DEP, and we value our relationships with DEP. But another thing that has been really important to the association has been the involvement of our members. So if you are not active right now on our Environment Committee, I encourage you to give me your card afterwards, and maybe next time you can be up here with us. But we do have an active dialogue with our members, and I'm excited to have these members here today to help shape this dialogue as we go forward on water infrastructure. And to kind of set the stage, I've asked each of them to give you just a few minutes, 3, I told them, overview of their perspective and where they're coming from. And then we're going to go into some questions, and at the end you're going to have the opportunity to also be involved in the conversation. So think of your questions now, and as we go through this dialogue, please feel free that you can be a part of this as well, too, and that we do encourage your participation. So with that, I'm going to start on the end with our large water company and Mr. Varley.
Thank you. I wish I could say I was under 40, but I think that's started out on the wrong foot. Good morning. As Michelle spoke of, we're the largest water supplier in the state of New Jersey, private water supplier. We have a population, we serve over 2.5 million people, which represents about 650,000 connections or customers. We have 9,000 miles of pipe in New Jersey that we maintain. We also pump and treat over probably 300 million gallons a day, and a couple of weeks ago, probably doing a little bit more than that. We're part of a larger parent company, American Water. American Water operates in 16 states and serves a population of over 15 million people in over 16 states. And I bring that up because the size that we can bring to New Jersey as part of the parent company strength is critical to New Jersey also. So let's look at the industry in general. Every 3 years, the American Society of Civil Engineers does a rating on the infrastructure in the United States. So for the last three ratings, in water and wastewater, we've rated a D, which pretty much means it's end of its useful life. If you look at the replacement rate of pipe in the United States at the rate we're going, we're on a replacement rate of once every 250 years. Pipe wasn't designed to go 250 years. In America, we've accelerated it. We're probably 125 years, but we still have more work to go. And Commissioner spoke of how there's $45 billion worth of work to be done in water and wastewater in the next 20 years in New Jersey. Across the United States, there's over $1 trillion that's required. So I think some of the things we're going to talk about today, how do you balance maintaining infrastructure and maintain service to our customers and still make it reasonably priced? So I think we'll hit that later.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll move down the line.
Can you hear me? Right. I represent various people in the industry, so I come at this a little bit differently than the people on either side of me. And what's fascinating from my perspective is to see how different assets are, infrastructure assets are maintained based on who my client happens to be. So I represent public entities, municipal utility authorities, municipalities, private water companies, and private industry. And what I find is they each have a very different take on all this. So let's start with the political reality. Most of our water infrastructure is either underground or it's in a remote location, a wastewater treatment plant, water treatment plant. You don't usually put them out where the public sees them every day. And what I find is, particularly with my municipal clients, if there's not a lot of money around, it's much easier to not spend money on infrastructure because people see roads, people see buildings, but it's easy to say, I'm only going to be mayor another year, so we won't spend any money on infrastructure this year. Conversely, when you look at private water companies who have capital programs, and every year they replace a certain percentage of their infrastructure. Maybe not as much as they would like every year, but they chip away at it. There's just a huge difference there. And then I would say the municipal utility authorities fall in between. They may not have as much money to spend as some of the private entities, but they have an asset management program. Asset management has come up several times in Commissioner Martin's speech. They have an asset management program. They know what they want to do. They're focused on making improvements. And they have the staff that understands how those improvements need to occur. But at the end of the day, I think some of you in this room need to make it clear that we can't ignore our infrastructure any longer. By ignoring our infrastructure, it ends up hurting industry. I don't have the time for it now, but I have a few examples I hope to be able to share with you later where, because of poorly managed infrastructure, industry is being harmed on a daily basis. If a pipe bursts and you have no water, your industry would obviously be affected. So I'll leave it there and I hope to come back to some other things later.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Let me turn this on.
It should be on.
I guess I just need to bring it closer. Thank you. Good morning. As I thought about planning for today, one of the things that really drove home to me was to bring to the table asset management. As Jim had said, and as the commissioner so aptly put, it's a key and fundamental driver in where the state's going to take infrastructure into the future. And when you think about that, and you think about the comments that Bill made about the American Society of Civil Engineering's ratings, not only across the country, but more specifically about New Jersey, in 2009, we had a D- rating. In 2013, we had a D rating, and it reminds me very much so when my children were in grammar and high school, a D is still a D. It's not a grade that we want to see, and we need to improve on that. And maybe having said that, one of the things that comes to the core every time you look at that D is that it comes down to lack of maintenance and lack of funding is what's the driver in the less than desirable rating that the state sees. And the maintenance goes hand in hand with the funding. Having said that, though, I can tell you through my affiliation with my peers throughout the state that there are many of us who subscribe to asset management and are making long-term investments in capital planning. I think it's fundamental that as a state, we have a statewide, we go from within all four corners of the state, and we have a matrix, if you will, to undertake asset management in every walk of life of utility, particularly in the water sector. As it relates to business and industry, I think it's pretty clear that your contributions to the state go directly to the state's long-term health and economic stability, and clearly until New Jersey improves its overall infrastructure ratings and the ability to maintain those ratings, it will give us an ability to advance our position as a leader in providing attractive resources and benefits back to the business and industry sector. Again, I'm limited to 2 to 3 minutes here. I think some of the drivers in asset management that we need to speak about more specifically on a state level is planning, funding, and education. In terms of planning, there are people in this room that may not want to hear what I have to say about it, but I don't know how we can move a concept of global asset management forward without first having a statewide water supply management plan. We need that document in order to use it as a benchmark to take the concept of managing our infrastructure forward. Where are we going to get water from? How are we getting it there? And how much are we delivering it? We need that as a tool to move forward. Without it, I think we've got in some respect, we've got the cart before the horse. In terms of funding, I think the EIT people do a tremendous job at helping at least the public sector fund the goals that we have in long-term capital improvements, and they should continue on that vein. And education, I think, really goes to 2 main aspects. We need to educate the consumer, meaning you in business and industry, as well as the general public at large. And we also need to educate the players involved in making the critical decisions. All too often, the leaders of the utility sector in New Jersey are elected and/or appointed officials, and rarely do you see them bring to the table, or rarely are they brought to the table and having been required to go through some level of first echelon training in utility management and financing, and et cetera. So I think those are things that we need to talk about as we move forward, and again, thank you for having me here this morning.
Thank you. Well, maybe if I was Oprah, I would have enough money today to be able to say, you get a new pipe and you get a new treatment plant. But since I'm not, and we're still looking at how do we upgrade this, as we're looking to replace and modernize our infrastructure and find some of these long-term practical solutions, what do you see as part of this plan? And recognizing that we also need to take some intermediate steps along the way, how can we achieve this goal of upgrading our state? And if it is a 30-year plan, where are we going to take the first step? So, Jim, I see you jumping in.
One of the things that none of us mentioned in our opening remarks is what I'll call full cost pricing. This is a big issue. We're not paying very much for water in New Jersey, and no one wants to pay more, but we need to start fully funding our infrastructure systems so that we can afford to do the things that we need to do. So I see this over and over and over again. You figure out how to finance the capital project, the initial capital project. If it costs $10 million, you figure out how to get $10 million and you build a facility. But you don't build into that the cost, or many people don't build into that, the cost of maintaining it over its 50-plus year life. So we need to start doing that.
I couldn't agree more. I think that all too often, we get a capital project on the books, we get it constructed, and there's very little thought in providing a revenue stream throughout the life cycle of that asset. And if that's not provided, and you do not ultimately reach that life cycle, not only do you have to reinvest sooner, but you find yourselves struggling with spot repairs that become very costly and really drive the economics of the individual utility in the wrong direction. So yes, we need to not only plan out these long-term capital projects, but to provide continual and cyclical funding to maintain them so that we get the biggest bang for our buck, and we don't see recurring capital investment prematurely.
And to that notion, you have to have a plan. And I can tell you right now, New Jersey American Water, in the next 5 years, I know we're going to spend $1.3 billion in capital. So you can look forward and see what that cost is going to be.
Great. Well, along the similar lines, too, of we are one of the original 13 colonies, and some of our infrastructure reflects that. We haven't necessarily had the luxury of learning the lessons from early adopters like our state, as other states out west have, and see how they can plan or be able to implement the most modern equipment. As we are starting to do these upgrades, what types of best practices can we bring to the table and help industry out as we are making these investments, as we're doing some of the planning? And I would think that with American Water's footprint in 16 different states, you have some experience here too.
So we have to be efficient. We've just laid out what the capital requirements are. We've also laid out, you can't put it on the backs of customers, and customers are not going to accept double-digit increases anymore. So what we have to do is operate efficiently. So let's take a look at New Jersey American. We're going to spend $1.3 billion over the next 5 years. We didn't pick that number by accident. We took a look at our expenses and what our needs are, and we came up with $1.3 billion so we could offer to our customers, on average, about a 2% increase in rates per year. Now, how do you get there, and how do you make this headroom I call for capital? What we take a look at is for every dollar of O&M expense we take out of the business on a permanent basis, whether it be through attrition, layers of management, technology, we can spend $6 of capital, put pipe in the ground with a zero rate increase to our customers. That's the biggest discipline we have right now going for us, that we can continue to invest in the infrastructure. And that's one of the critical things. You can't have double-digit increases, but you got to meet this need, so how are we going to get there? And that's one way.
Great. Well, one of the things that I see often is that as engineers, since I'm one of them, I think I can criticize the profession a little bit. I don't think we do a good enough job evaluating the life cycle cost of an asset. Oftentimes, particularly, I see this with my municipal clients, they want the cheapest initial solution. But that solution may be less to construct initially, but if you look at it over its life cycle, they would have been better off spending a few $1 million more initially to end up with a lower cost solution long-term. So that would definitely be a best management practice I would say we don't focus on enough.
So you don't always go for the cheapest option.
Right. The cheapest initially.
Option, yes.
Yeah.
And I think both of my colleagues' comments, I absolutely concur with. I think one of the other management practices that we employ at our utility, and I see as a very growing trend in the industry, is a real comprehensive financial plan, not just simply saying we need to come up with $1 million to do this project or $5 million to do this project. We have a team of professionals within our utility and I see it in other walks of life in the utilities around New Jersey, that all of whom are really developing refined fiscal management plans that are going to be tried and tested as we move these infrastructure improvements forward. So I think that's a best management practice that's been here a while, but it still remains in development and dynamic.
Right. And now that Commissioner Martin has left the room, I can talk a little bit more about the regulators. And I know DEP has come a long way over the years, and when I first started at BIA, it was quite the impediment to getting things done, and we've seen a lot of progress and red tape reduction and such. But at the same time, our regulatory structure doesn't always reward infrastructure investment, and it doesn't necessarily spur it either. And so what kinds of changes do you see necessary in order for us to help our planning and to see this the investment in the infrastructure made over the next few years?
Take that one first. Sure. I think you have seen changes in the regulatory environment. In 2012, the BPU implemented a thing called the DSIC program. It's a Distribution System Improvement Charge, which is a huge step forward. And how it operates is we're allowed to take 5% of our revenues and invest it in pipe in the ground to replace pipe. They allow us a surcharge for that, so we have an incremental increase to the customer, so it's not rate shock when you stay out for 3 or 4 years between cases and you have all this capital pent up. Now we can incrementally increase our spending, and without putting a burden on us by fronting capital. So we've seen, a dramatic change in that. We've fully executed on it. I think if you tie in the piece I just talked about before about reducing expenses and making headroom for capital, you don't have to look any further than our latest rate filing, which is public information now. We spent over $300 million in less than a 3-year period just on pipe using that DSIC program, and we spent over $800 million in 3 years, and at the same time, we reduced our operating expense by almost $20 million. So think about it. We spent $300 million in pipe, but by reducing our operating expenses, $120 million of that had no impact on the customers. So I think we've fully leveraged that, and I think the BPU has recognized that as a good tool to help accelerate this. But there's also other programs out there in other states, such as a thing called, I hate the acronyms, but in New York State they have a thing called a SIC, which is a System Improvement Charge. So if you build a $10 million treatment, we get recovery of that when it goes into service. So I think all those things help us recover the cash quickly, make us attractive to investors to do it, but at the same time it focuses on the customer and they get the benefit of it without having rate shock.
I see a change at DEP over the last couple of years that is somewhat encouraging and I hope continues, which is especially the lower level permit people are being instructed to spend their time more efficiently. So if there are 2 permits that they're reviewing, and one has the potential to have very minimal environmental harm, and another could have serious environmental harm, they should focus more of their energy on the second one. And that is something that I have seen over the years not happen, so it's encouraging to see that happen. The other issue is on the asset management side. The New Jersey Environmental Infrastructure Trust Program is now giving credit for asset management programs. So if somebody comes in for funding and they show a advanced asset management program in place, they're given preference for that financing over somebody else who might have a similar project and has a poor asset management program. That's great to see, because that money will be better spent by allocating it towards somebody who's going to maintain that asset. So I think that's encouraging, and I think we should encourage DEP to continue to do things like that.
And if I could stick on permits for a moment, because they're one of my favorite things, and I think that we've seen a lot of great improvements in general permits as well, too. But how much do you see the permit coordination happening? Because I think that's a big part of this, too. And one of the things that I'm working on the side is Sarah's Magic Box, where everything gets put in and it gets prioritized and it gets coordinated, and if we're ripping up the road, we can replace the water main, the gas main, and then repave the road. But how much do you see in terms of permit efficiency also helping the process, or if we would have a more coordinated approach going forward, could that help reduce the cost and then also add a little bit more certainty? Because I know that's always an issue too.
Yeah, I do a lot of work with permits in New Jersey, and again, the senior management at DEP, I can see definitely putting an emphasis into permit coordination. However, I had a client, private client, very well-known drug manufacturer in New Jersey, who needed more water. They needed to expand. They needed more water. They ended up having to bring a pipe in to get water from a very good private water company. And what they went through to get permits, watching this occur, was unbelievable. And I had to go to a very senior level at DEP to be able to encourage them to encourage the lower level staff to start coordinating. And it still took a few years to get all the permits. So there's definitely more work to be done on that.
Having been a utility that was truly devastated by the impact of Hurricane Sandy, I can tell you firsthand that in Sandy's aftermath, I saw a remarkable change within the department and the way that they, particularly the senior level people, seem to get their feet on the ground and understand some of the trials and tribulations that we would go through in terms of, we've got a project, we've got an urgent situation, we need to move it forward, but yet we need permits. And as soon as that word came up, it was, let's slow the process down and see where we need to go. But I definitely saw a distinct and positive change in the department in issuing those permits, and they seem to continue to maintain that same incentive today as we move out of Sandy and into scheduled rebuilding of our infrastructure.
Well, and I think that Sandy did highlight for a lot of people the need for the infrastructure investment, but water is often something that's underground, you don't think about, you don't see, and I know for many of our small businesses, they're balancing different increases, whether it is minimum wage, health insurance, other things like that. So as we're looking to have this discussion about why to invest in infrastructure, if you were to tell a small business why it's important to replace a pipe or to build a new treatment facility, what would your number one reason be?
Well,
I think that's pretty easy.
Okay.
One word.
No, just one reason. It doesn't have to be one word.
Well, we have a charge to provide you with a continuous and uninterrupted supplier service, that whether it be on the wastewater side or the water side. And what comes part and parcel with that, providing those services, is that at the same time, we need to provide you with a predictable, sustainable cost associated with that. So investment in the infrastructure today is going to maintain all four of those fronts.
infrastructure is the building block for all business. You have to have it if you want to attract industry. But one of the byproducts of improving infrastructure is there was a study done in Washington that just came out. They solicited 13 cities throughout the United States and saw what capital investment did for jobs. So for every $1 million of capital investment we spend, you get 5 direct jobs and 11 indirect jobs. That affects everybody in this room, whether you be a supplier, an engineer. So besides building up and being able to move your businesses into strong infrastructure, there's byproducts along the way, too.
So 5 direct, 11 indirect jobs?
Total of 16.
Okay.
And if you don't do it, you end up with things like water main breaks or so much infiltration into a sewer system that when you as an industry go to expand, there's no capacity. So not doing it is simply not acceptable in the long run.
Great. And I want to bring you all into this discussion too. So if anybody has a question, just raise your hand and Kim will come along with the microphone and we'll pull you into this too. So I see a hand up front and she's making her way.
Thank you. What is the cost associated with going from a D to a C to a B to an A?
The ASCE has predicted that cost, that's the $40 or $45 million deficit that everyone's been talking about, and that value can be attributed to bringing our D rating to a B rating. 40 to $45 billion over the next 20 years.
And as it goes along, you're going to see aging of other infrastructure.
I was going to say.
There's going to be...
Sure.
It's going to be continuous.
I think they shut me off. I get the hint. So there's going to be depreciation of other assets that are going to get older. So it's like when I pointed out before, we're on a pace of 1 in 250 years replacement. We've got to accelerate it, and that's to that point.
Yeah, well, and even as what you were saying, if you're spending $1 billion over 5 years, and we have to spend $40 billion, that's going to be quite some time as well, too.
Sure. Hi, I'm Chris Stone from New Jersey Future. Jim, you raised the issue of municipal utility authorities and the difficulty they have in getting the support from their elected officials, which you talked about as well. It's really a structural issue. You know, we've got these tiny places that don't have the sort of political support for the kinds of funding decisions that need to be made. So I'm interested in what the panel thinks about how to solve this.
Well, one of the things that I see is the regional utility authorities seem to be able to focus on utilities better than some of the individual municipal authorities or even municipalities without an authority. One of the things that hasn't come up today is there are many authorities that have been disbanded over the last few years. In many instances, those authorities had run the utility very well, and they had set aside money for future capital improvements. And those future improvements, that capital was basically consumed by the municipality and used for other things when they disbanded the utility authority. It's really troubling when you see an authority that is well-run and that has planned properly for the future, has the proper reserves in place, and the money is grabbed to avoid raising taxes for some other issue for today. That's happened, and we really need to make sure it doesn't happen.
Conversely to that, so you have small municipalities out there that, say, 9,000, 10,000 customers, haven't really paid attention to the infrastructure like most of the United States has. Their assets fully depreciated, and they turn around and they say, my goodness, we have to invest X amount of dollars on the backs of 4,000 people.
Can't do it.
Can't do it. So that's where where the private sector comes in and leverages our size. The governor recently signed the Water Infrastructure Protection Act last year, and essentially what it does is if you qualify as a municipality that is a emerging condition, which pretty much means you can't invest in infrastructure, you don't have the capital, you can sell the system to a private without a referendum. The second part of the bill is, and I talked about the depreciation, if you've depreciated an asset, there's really no value to it. So this bill gives us the ability to get two prices so we can fees the debt for the place and the town and give them money. But the real advantage of this is, say a town needs $20 million in the next 2 years to invest in a wastewater system that's 4,000 people. $20 million, they'd see 25% increases, 50% increases. So what they've done is they've come to places like ourselves, and we've purchased systems competitively, and now I can invest the $20 million and spread it across 650,000 customers like we do with the rest of our customers. So that's where New Jersey can leverage their size and also help this infrastructure challenge. Now, there was some naysayers on the bill that might get abused, but I think we've seen an incremental approach to municipalities that really need the assistance that we can help leverage our size to invest in capital.
I'd like to comment on both comments. I think Jim kind of stole my thunder when he talked about the dissolution of utilities around New Jersey. I certainly share in his opinion on it. That's a trend that we need to, as a state, we need to really put in check. And I'm not here to say that all authorities should not be dissolved, and none of them should be dissolved, but there needs to be a process, and there needs to be a level field, a streamlined approach to to that undertaking. As part of my activity in the Association of Environmental Authorities, we recently conducted a poll. We went out, we looked at 20% of the state's municipalities. We started at the letter A and we got through to maybe the letter E or F, and we had accomplished a 20% review. And in that small sampling, in a window of 2 years, there were $80 million of funds that were dedicated within the utility that were pulled from that utility and went towards the general side of municipal operating budget. And that's wrong. It's simply wrong that money set aside for maintaining our infrastructure should remain with our infrastructure. With respect to the public-private partnerships, there's absolutely a place for them. I think before utility owners and municipalities in New Jersey go down that road, that it should be a fundamental requirement that our elected and appointed officials that are making those decisions receive some form of formal education before they make that decision. All too often, we have people who are appointed or elected to office that end up making those decisions that just don't necessarily understand the subtle part of how to operate a utility and how to fiscally preserve a utility. So the decision to have a public-private relationship and the decision to sell your utility may in fact be the best decision, but you need to be best informed before you make that decision.
And to that note, it's not for everyone. It depends on what the condition of the system or what the circumstances are. I agree with that.
Yes, I think education is key. One of the things that BIA had helped do early on as we were getting new commissioners at BPU and at DEP and in other areas was help facilitate some site visits for educational learning. And that way, regulators didn't have to worry about problems with regulatees, and we could at the same time be able to say, here's what a wastewater treatment facility is, here's drinking water, this is what it looks like, here's the ozone machine, and be able to help educate them so that as they're making some of these decisions, they understand. Okay, other questions out there? I see one in the back.
Yes, I have actually more of a comment than a question. My name is David Zimmer, and as Commissioner Martin pointed out, I'm actually the banker for the DEP. I run the NJEIT, and all three gentlemen are very familiar with us up on the stage. They've utilized us a number of times as we provide very cheap subsidized funding for municipalities and utility authorities. I want to actually go back to the comment about the American Society of Civil Engineers. It really is a 20 to 30-year capital improvement program, but just do the simple math, $45 billion divided by 20, that's $2 billion a year, and how do we get to $2 billion? And I want to make the comment that we're actually spending a good portion of that right now just ineffectively. So the rule of thumb is when we have emergency repairs, you spend 300% of what it would have cost you to do that work in the normal course of business. Right? 300% because you didn't plan correctly, that you've got pipes and equipment that are well past their useful life. So a rhetorical question really to the industry and to the state at large would be, how much is the state, how much is all of our water systems spending on emergency breaks on an annual basis? And if everybody thought about asset management, which is really kind of one of the key points here, and spent that money instead of waiting for it to break, how much do we spend every year on emergency breaks? And we plow that instead into long-term strategic capital spending, and we will get to that $2 billion annually very quickly.
All right, thank you.
I think I could add to that, and part of that getting there is through technology, and what we're trying to deploy is acoustical listening, because if you can listen to leaks before they're happening, we've started to deploy that, you can cut down, you can proactively go after that piece of pipe instead of waiting for it to get repaired, which will cost at least 10 to 25. So I think part of that piece is technology also, besides the planning.
And as technology changes more, hopefully we can use that to also bring down the cost.
Absolutely.
Great.
I think maybe to add to what you were saying there, David, is that, when we talk about asset management, all too often people think of it as a computer software program or a spreadsheet, and it's not. It's really it's a mindset or a way of life for a given utility. We need to drive that home and get the utility owners to live and breathe asset management on a daily basis, and you'll begin to see those emergency repairs declining in numbers and in value.
Great. Kim, I think there's another question in front of you.
Just curious, the fine revenue that the DEP receives, does that go back to the general fund of the state or directly back to the DEP?
Yeah, I think that most of the money goes to general fund, but I can be corrected on that as well.
Talking about the state revolving fund that comes from EPA down?
No, the
Permits.
the fines. The fines.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the question.
I believe that goes back to general fund, but
Dan has a comment.
Oh, Dan, okay.
It goes to the general fund, and a portion of it is appropriated to the Department for Operations, but that's really kind of a year-to-year decision based on the legislative process of the budget.
Great, thank you. And for those of you who may not have heard, Dan's assistant commissioner, so I was wrong. The regulators aren't completely gone, but it's good to have him in the room too. And that the fines go to the general fund and then get appropriated back to the department through the budgeting process. And with that, Michelle is going to come back up. But I do encourage you to keep being part of this conversation. And as I said, if you'd like to join the Environment Network, give me your card, or if you have more thoughts on this, feel free to shoot me an email and we'll gather it all.
Great. All right, let's have a round of applause for our panel and our great facilitator. A word that came up many, many times this morning is education. That's what this series is all about. It's about education. It's about educating us as business leaders. It's about educating those boots on the ground. It's about educating our regulators. When we're all educated, we can understand the value of the investment and the return on the investment. So we're taking the time to become educated so we can share the message, and only through that education can we come to those practical solutions. You know, we heard a whole lot of things. There's planning that needs to take place at the state level. There's partnership that is needed in the community. I see Sustainable Jersey, a great partner in the community. New Jersey Future doing the Urban Waters Project. And of course, responsible funding. And I can't help but, put in the plug for the EIT, because if anybody wants to talk about what is a bank that works in the state of New Jersey, what is a bank that leverages local dollars out on a bond market and gets return for its investment, it's the Environmental Infrastructure Trust, and it's a model we need to look at across our other infrastructure in the state of New Jersey. Well, one last round, I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank our presenters. What a great panel. I know I took a lot of notes. We're looking forward to the continuation of the series. Please take the postcards that are on your table that tell you when the next round of the series is coming up. Another plug on September 25th, next Friday, our first annual Women Business Leaders Forum. We have over 200 women coming to listen to a dynamic panel of discussion along the day about how we continue to instill leadership in females to the C-suite. So we got great stuff going on this fall. I want to thank everyone who's here today. You all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back soon.